Hello and welcome to our second episode of Economic Review. I'm Uditha and with me is Rumeth Jayasinghe. Um, it's been 2 weeks since a new government, a new kind of government, came to power in Sri Lanka, um, September 21st, I think September 21st and 22nd. A lot has happened since, but I think what's been most surprising about it all is that the new government led by the left-leaning National People's Power Party, the NPP, has been surprisingly moderate and surprisingly mute about most of the reforms it has undertaken since. Um, with me is Rumeth, and I think Rumeth has a much firmer grasp on the whole situation than I. So, Rumeth, just to start off, I mean, how have these 2 weeks flown by in Sri Lanka?
Yes, hello, this is April, and I warmly welcome all of our viewers to our second episode of this podcast. Yes, the answer to your question is it's quite stable and it's quite, the government has been quiet on certain areas,
Mm.
but a lot has happened since where they have come into power. The prices have reduced,
Mm.
the dollar rate has gone below 300 rupees,
Mm.
that is after a long time, and the stock market reaching 12,000, the all share price index reaching the 12,000 mark
Mm.
on October 1st, and the inflation rate going, now we are witnessing a deflation rate here in Sri Lanka.
Year on year. Is this
So
year on year or month on month?
it's year on year,
Mm.
based on year on year, and it's based on not on the national consumer price index, but the Colombo consumer price index.
Mm.
So those, from an economic front, those are the events, the major events that have happened since September 21st.
Mm.
Apart from that, policy-wise, I think the NPP has clearly mentioned their view. They won't take any major decisions up until the general elections.
So I mean, has this been communicated very explicitly that they won't be tinkering around with the economy since general election, or is that the general assumption in among the
I
party?
think it's the general assumption, because one thing, one way, since they have slim majority within the parliament, they don't. They have like three-member cabinet. They don't have any power to make some drastic changes to the economy. So up until they get a clear majority in the parliament, I don't think that they will do any major reforms or any major policy changes to the economy, as well as other aspects as well, to take the country as a whole.
So obviously, I mean, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the reforms that they have undertaken, how are other parties reacting to A, the general election, and B, to being governed by a party that they dismissed for much of their lives?
Uh, Talking about the opposition, the some of the view that they should support the government,
Mm.
and some of the view that they can get a clear majority. Especially if you take the SAB, some MPs are saying yes, we should support the government, we should support their activities, as that's the responsibility as the present opposition party. But some are saying yes, we have the clear majority, we are able to get a clear majority and form a new government, and they believe that they can support the AKD
Mm.
in continuing the progress of this nation, but that is yet to be decided. Still, no opposition party has come into a solution. A conclusion that how they are going to contest in the elections. All the opposition parties are exploring options to form an alliance or come stronger in the upcoming general elections.
So am I right in saying that the political right, there are different strands of the political right. You have the UNP, you have the SJP, and now you have the Dilip Javira-led Maubima Janata Party. I may be wrong in my naming of the party. It may be the wrong name, but my point is that these represent different strands of the political right. Is it true, do you think, that them being disunited can actually benefit the left-leaning NPP?
First thing that we have to understand is yes, there have been right wing and left wing politics in Sri Lanka,
Mm.
but since this election, we have seen a political change, a drastic political change. I don't think we can categorize right at this moment. We can categorize this right wing politics and left wing politics. Yes, we can take NPP as a center left party, but apart from NPP, where do we see Mauvima Janata Paksha? Yes, some of their policies are more oriented towards the right wing politics, but they do have some left wing policies as well. So it's a 50-50 call for Mahavimu Janata Paksha, but other parties, SJP and UNP, they have right wing policies. They have been the right wing mainstream parties in Sri Lanka, but still uncertain. They have some differences as well. The way they view the economy is also different, and how they are going, how they are seeing this political situation in Sri Lanka, it is also different. So I can't make a certain call on them, but we have to wait and see how things unfolds.
Okay, you mentioned economy, and here we'll get into the reforms that the NPP has been enacting since they came to power. In what way has their reforms been, have the reforms been predictable, and in what way have they been unpredictable?
Reforms, some have been predictable and some have been unpredictable to some extent, but if you take a look at the previous government that was led by Ranil Wickremesinghe, his policies were real predictable. He did the same things back in 2001 and between 2001 and 2004, and after he came into power in 2022, he did try to implement those reforms again, but in a different way. But now people have spoken. They have given power to a new president, and how he carries out the reforms, it is yet to be decided.
Hmm. I mean, there were on social media, like everyone was, some were afraid, some were like really happy that, a left-leaning, center-left government was coming into power. But looking at it since they came to power, I mean, that time frame, like they've been surprisingly, tame about the IMF, surprisingly tame about fuel prices. There are conflicting accounts of how these reforms are being undertaken and implemented. For instance, we saw one minister saying that they're not following the same fuel price formula as before. How do you explain these different, at one level, they are saying we are anti-corruption, anti-establishment, and at another level, we are seeing continuity in these reforms. How do you see that?
Since NPP is a centre left party, I think they have done both. They have solidified their position that they are a centre left party because they have they have increased the farmer subsidy and they have reduced the prices of goods and services. I mean mainly food items. So if we take the left perspective, that's what they do. That's what the left politicians do mostly in other countries as well. But now this IMF thing, it's not a usually the left leaning countries, they don't like the IMF. But the NPP has said that we are clearly committed to the IMF program and we will continue it. And they want to see how those actions will turn into results, benefiting the economy and the country as a whole. And it's yet to be seen.
Hmm.
We don't know.
We
They
don't know.
will make some changes. Now they have already said that they are going to give some relief to the people who have been burdened by higher VAT and higher income taxes.
Yeah. So
Clearly mentioned what they have discussed, but we have to let's see how things unfold.
So here's a question from a friend of mine from Hong Kong. Um, Basically, the new government is left wing, but isn't that going to be a bit of a challenge when executing fiscal austerity of the sort that we have been seeing for the last 2.5 years? What's your take on that? Or are we actually playing around with words like left wing and right wing without really understanding how parties in Sri Lanka operate?
Again, this answer I can give is it's yet to be seen because it's been like 2 weeks since they came to power.
Hmm.
Yes, they might. What your friend Hong Kong friend has mentioned is right. There will be some disturbance or rather say disruptions to when it comes to doing some IMF reforms, but it's yet to be decided. I think AKD will take a balanced approach. He won't go much into the far right or the far left. Take a balanced approach and see how his priority is to get the economy right rather than doing other things. I mean, he has mentioned that his government has come into power under the slogan of anti-corruption. But first things first, even to do this anti-corruption program, I think they should get the economy on the right track, make it stable, and continue what they have been what has been continued by the previous government. We have to wait and see. Now we have seen some positive gains. Now this inflation rate coming now it's a minus figure. That means the deflation rate.
Hmm.
So it's not pure AKD policies. It's something that has been happening. I mean, since the previous government, we have to will see how things unfold.
Okay, so we talked about how possibly how this party, how the NPP will, I mean, how their relationship with other parties, how that will possibly evolve. But looking into the future, it's not just what the NPP does or what happens in Sri Lanka that's going to affect what happens in the Sri Lankan economy. It's also external developments. Looking at the world around Sri Lanka, the region in Sri Lanka, today Jaishankar visited India. Sorry, Jaishankar visited Colombo. And unless I'm much mistaken, Anurakumar Dissanayake will undertake a visit to India. So how do you see foreign policy playing out under this new government from the little that we have seen over the last 2 weeks?
If you take, I'll take country by country or by region. Now, since AKD came to power, Japanese they said that they are going to restart all the stall projects, especially the 11 development projects that has been happening in Sri Lanka, which I mean collaboration with the Japanese authorities.
Yeah.
And China, they have met. I mean, the Chinese ambassador met Anwar Kumar Dissanayake, and they said that they are committed to the restructuring and economic stability of Sri Lanka.
Mm,
And the Chinese Development Bank and the Exim Bank, they have pledged their support to the government, continued support to the government.
mm,
From an Indian perspective, I mean, Jai Shankar is the first high-ranking foreign officer to visit Sri Lanka since AKD came to power, since the new government came to power. And apart from that, US has also pledged support, but it
mm.
is yet to be tested because they
Yeah.
haven't clearly mentioned what they are going to do.
Mm,
On an foreign policy wise, it's good. The picture is good,
mm.
but still, I mean, it's early to say.
Yeah, it's early to say.
You 4 to 5 months in AKD's government, you will see the changes and you will see how other countries will react.
Obviously, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's the usual rhetoric, like India is interested in stability in its backyard, and the US is always going to be talking about shared values in the Indo-Pacific. In fact, the US, all three people who responded to AKD, from the ambassador to the State Department spokesperson to the US president himself, I mean, they keep talking about, the Indo-Pacific and shared values. And then, of course, you have the Chinese ambassador saying it's a new era for Sri Lanka. You can say that of any government that comes to power. But looking beyond the prism of bilateral relations, looking at what's happening in West Asia, the Middle East, looking at what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, how do you see an NPP government trying to navigate its way out of these complexities?
First, if you take the Israel-Iran war, the major concern now is about the oil prices, whether it
Yeah.
will hit $100 or not. Right now,
Right now, it's about 70, I think, per barrel.
now it's 78. The crude
78.
Brent crude oil price is USD 78.
Okay.
So it hasn't changed much. I mean, it has risen by 5%, not like the rise that we saw during
The Russian invasion.
2022
Oh,
when Russia invaded Ukraine.
okay, okay,
Yeah, the oil barrel price went to $120
okay.
at that time. We haven't seen some much of an context like that. But having said that, it is possible because even Iran, they are the seventh largest oil producer and part of the OPEC as well. If I'm not mistaken, they are supplying 1.5 million barrels per day. So that means, and half of it goes to China.
Mm,
That's a interesting fact, but they will have to navigate. AKD's government will have to navigate with these global shocks.
mm,
I'd rather say, but still, there hasn't been a big change. They
mm,
don't have to panic. They have reduced the prices, and that is based on the world oil prices. Do what we have to do. If there's a change in the global context, make the relevant changes. But first in, first out. First of all, I mean, make things clear. Do mention their price formula, how
mm.
they are going to change the prices, and how they are not going to change the prices, and keep the prices stable. Because that is quite important. Because people will ask why the prices have increased, and they will have to answer as well.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously, what we can take from this is 2 weeks is too early a time frame, a too short a time frame. It's difficult to project into the future. But obviously, at the end of the day, we can't, use labels that are current in Western societies or other advanced societies like left wing or right wing in our politics. But even taking that into account, The NPP has never been in power. Sorry, I would say the NPP led by the JVP, the left-wing party that's dominating the NPP alliance, has never been in power except for a very brief period under Chandrika Kumaratunga. This was way back in 2004, where Anukumar Dissanayake was Minister for
Have
Agriculture.
like
So they,
30 members in the
yeah,
parliament.
yeah, exactly. That was also like the peak of their parliamentary presence as well. They got several seats, never to be repeated again. But history can repeat. Who knows? Uh, Going forward, do you see the NPP being in power as not just the party of the president, but also the party of the parliament, so to speak, the governing party? Do you see this enabling the NPP to further moderate its stances on issues like education? We already seen them sort of appointing top business and corporate leaders as advisors. So do you see this as an opportunity for them to not only break away from the politics of the past, if at all, but also to moderate itself as it goes along, as it actually gets into the business of governing a country?
They will, I mean, they will try to make some new thing. I mean, try to bring in some new things to the political system of Sri Lanka. They have already said that they will make some adjustments to the education system. Harni Amasu has clearly said that major reforms are needed for the education sector. This has not been, I mean, this was not discussed by the early governments. Early governments came into power saying new things, but they did not do anything. The
Okay.
education system in Sri Lanka, as many say, it's outdated, and this criticism has been there for like now 10 to 15 years. And I strongly agree that our education system is outdated.
Mm.
They say that they are going to make some changes and make it more stable and also build confidence among the stakeholders involved in the education sector. So this is just an example of how they are going to govern the country in the future. They are trying to make some, they are trying to bring in some new things to the political spectrum in Sri Lanka, but at the same time they will try to make some bring some new faces to the parliament as well. That means new faces are there in the parliament. That means a lot of new things are going to come to the Sri Lankan society. But it's, I mean, they have, these are all the, this is just about talking. Whether they will walk the talk, that is to be seen as well.
I know, and Sri Lanka has, I mean, we've had we've gone through this whole charade of a new era in politics coming in, and then great disappointments. Basically, that so-called new era being followed by a series of disappointments. It's left to be seen whether we'll see the same show here. But before we wrap up, maybe if we can talk about the elephant in the room, which is
First, Udita, what do you think about the executive presidency? I mean, they have every presidential candidate who has won the election. They have already said they have always said that they are going to abolish the executive presidency in Sri Lanka, but no one has done up until now. Now, AKD's government is also saying that they are trying to abolish this executive presidency. Do you see it happening? Will it happen?
well, this whole executive presidency being abolished became a mantra in the Chandrika Kumaratunga period. She gave to power on the promise of abolishing it, and she ended up serving 2 terms and doing nothing to actually abolish it. What we've seen since 1977, when the executive presidency was first enacted or implemented, is number one, a gradual increase and concentration of power on the one hand, and number two, attempts made at reducing the scope of those powers. So on the one hand, you had the 17th Amendment, which I think was passed under Chandrika Kumaratunga, appointing independent commissions, being followed by the 18th Amendment, which actually reduced or rather abolished term limits, being followed by the 20th Amendment, which basically, the 19th Amendment, which basically got rid of that, basically which restored term limits. And then you have the 20th Amendment, 21st Amendment, and it's a series of reducing powers, increasing powers, reducing powers, increasing powers. That's what we've been seeing, incrementalism and reductions in, the power of the executive presidency. In terms of, obviously, there's a constitutional process which I'm not too familiar with when it comes to abolishing the executive presidency. I think you require a referendum. My guess is that there will be attempts made at reforming the executive presidency, but given how polarized politics have become in Sri Lanka, from a pragmatic point of view, I am very much doubtful as to whether there will be abolition anytime soon. Not to say that, not to cast aspersions on the NPP's motives, which are good, but to also say that sometimes politicians and political parties have to act not from the kindness of their heart, but from a consideration of the world around them. So if they feel that they are being besieged by other parties and other political ideologies, then they'll probably respond by actually not abolishing the executive presidency, but keeping it as a sort of safeguard against any threat to their survival. This has been the case under Mahinda Rajapaksa, Chandrika Kumaratunga, Maithripala Sirisena. It will probably continue to be the case with or without the NPP in power, but that's just me making a prediction. I may be wrong. I'm not a political pundit, but I'd like to hear what you think.
Uh, Again, since this has been discussed,
Yeah.
I mean, this was discussed back in the earlier presidential elections, and it has been discussed. It was discussed in the last election as well.
Hmm.
Again, whether this will happen or not, I can't exactly say, but I do think now it's time to abolish this executive presidency. Now, it has been here, it has been there for like 50, more than 50, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken, right? For like 50 to 55 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, it has back when JR introduced the executive president. I don't think that he thought that this magnitude of changes would have happened to the Sri Lankan society. But again, as I say, it's I can't say what's going to happen when it's abolished. But
Yeah.
if it's abolished, it's for the best of the country.
Well, that's your perspective, and I fully understand where it's coming from. I think we better wrap up by actually addressing the elephant in the room, which is, I think we've seen about 3 meetings with the IMF so far. We saw one even today, no?
Yes, I think the president had his second consecutive meeting today.
Yeah, that was a personal meeting, not a delegation meeting, I think.
Yes, that's as far as
Why
the
three meetings in like less than half a week? What's the reason? What's going on?
I mean, now they are trying this. First of all, this is the first time the IMF is also meeting the new president.
Mm.
So, I mean, they need to build some trust within the two parties, and that's why they are having meetings quite frequently. First, they had a meeting with the economic team, then with the president, now again with the president. And they will be, they have, I don't know whether there will be another meeting. I think they are trying to, I don't think they are trying to make some changes. They are trying to communicate on how they are going to work towards the this prosperity in Sri Lanka. And if NPP wants to make some adjustments, I think now it's the best time to communicate about them to the IMF so they can make all the adjustments. I mean, they can understand the adjustments and move forward. As Vijay Hera said, Vijay Hera has said that this is not, I mean, the complex in meeting like we had back in when Vikram Singh was in power.
Mm.
They will have another meeting, I think, in October last week. That will be in the United States. So yes, as far as concerned, what they have said is that they are committed to the IMF program, the NPP government, and they provide relief to the people again burdened by the higher VAT and income taxes, and also the third review, which has been postponed multiple times now. They should make, I mean, try to make it as possible. I mean, try to get it done as soon as possible.
So, yeah, to wrap things up, and I just realized that there's this light bulb here that I should have switched on, but I didn't, but who cares? Um, Final words.
There's nothing much to say. I think we have covered everything that has to be covered. But again, we have to be optimistic. By the time we telecast our next podcast episode, we will have some insight about the general elections as well. Because today is 4th and day after October 6th, the nominees will start their campaigning. So we will get to know who will be contesting for the general elections. So that will be the main focus in the upcoming month. I mean, in the upcoming weeks of October and as well as the early weeks of November. So we'll do some talking about that. And the election, US election is also nearing. So it's tight right now, and we'll do some analysis on that as well.
We probably have to because what when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches cold. So I suppose this election cycle is going to be very important. So that's for a later date and conversation. But thank you so much for taking time for this, Rumit. Really appreciate it. And for our listeners and viewers, we appreciate you all tuning in to our latest episode. We'll join you again either next week or the week after with another analysis. And hopefully by then, as Rumeth said, we'll get more information, we'll get more details about how, not just the NPP government's reforms, but also the way it's thinking about those reforms as well. So have a great weekend ahead, guys, and thank you again, Rumeth, for joining.
Thank you, Uditha, and hope our viewers have enjoyed and do join us in the next episode as well.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.